Welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, criminal court, and other court issues, as well as CPS. I am your host, Marianne Petrie. You can find me, my books, and blogs on dismantlingfamilycourtcorruption.com. Also, if you have a tale to tell, you're welcome to contact me there as well on dismantlingfamilycourtcorruption.com. I have a brand new guest on. I'm proud to have Nicholas Hall's mother on, Darla. Now, she wants to share the story of her son, Nicholas Hall, who was recently sentenced to 21 years in prison in Connecticut. His nightmare began in 2020 when allegations surfaced just weeks after a custody dispute with his then wife. One alleged victim later confirming nothing ever happened, yet Nicholas was still prosecuted. And from the very beginning, his case has been marked by conflicts of interest, improper rulings, collusion, and powerful political connections that cast doubt on the fairness of his trial. In February 2025, Nicholas was convicted of six counts, though not on the most serious charges. On August 14th, he was sentenced and taken into custody despite 5 years on bond without incident, no prior record, and voluntarily passing both psycho SEXUAL evaluation and a polygraph. Evidence was mishandled, jury instructions flawed, witnesses were coached, and DNA methodology improperly admitted. Yet, his motions for a new trial and bond pending appeal have been denied. And that's why we're here today. And his mother, Darla Hall, is seeking anyone who can offer expert assistance, legal representation for his appeal, or support with a bond pending appeal to the appellate court. Because Nicholas Hall, his freedom and his truth depend upon it. And I also know him, very nice fellow. Very sorry this has gone this way, because in my opinion, lies are the same as murder. So I welcome you, Darla Hall, to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Marianne, for having me.
You gave me a boatload of transcripts, and I had looked at them. And I guess one thing stood out was this false accuser, when asked, "Do you remember this? Do you remember that?" She states, "I don't know." However, she can remember going to a beauty salon.
Yes.
So tell me more, because apparently the prosecution didn't enter into evidence certain things.
Yes, this all started in 2020. Right, my son had separated from his then wife in the beginning of 2020. She had filed the dissolution of marriage in March of 2020. And when he received that document, it had stated that she was seeking sole physical legal custody of their child. And he really didn't understand what that meant. There was no involvement of money or alimony. It was really just about the custody of his child. And so when I kind of explained to him what she was seeking, he says, "I'm not going to sign this." So he relayed that information to her and said, "Look, I'm not going to give up my parental rights because that gives you the right to go wherever you want." And this, of course, she was not happy with this. And so, it seemed like they were kind of amicable for a period of time. But then when that happened, things changed. She had come to my house the beginning of May with her other two children and my granddaughter. And she actually tried to reconcile with him at that point, to which he said, "That's not going to happen." And she left not happy about that, of course. And it was about 3 weeks later, on May 21st, that she alleged this disclosure was made. And that just happened to be the date of birth for my other granddaughter, his other child. And it was the first day he had made a public post with a picture of himself with her. It was kind of ironic that after we received discovery and went through a lot of these things, that we discovered that her first statement to the police, she alleges that this disclosure was made when they went to swim at their friend's house. Now, ironically, 2 weeks later, her second statement to the police was it happened at a sleepover at the same friend's house. It's really crazy to look at these documents and think, how did the police take both statements from her written and signed, but never did an actual interview of her that was recorded? Everybody else that they interviewed, it was interviewed via a video and an audio. But for her, they did not. And she lives literally a mile from the police station. They forced
Convenient.
these they forced these other people that were questioned to travel all the way from the state of New York for an interview, and they recorded it, but they didn't record hers. So it was ironic. She withheld my granddaughter from any visitation with him until it was June 11th, where she finally said, "Hey, you can come see your daughter and visit with her." And when he arrived for that visit is where he was arrested and taken into custody. I do want to mention that her relative is a police commissioner in the very town he was arrested in.
Mhm.
He showed up on the scene and smiled at my son. The same day, they did claim that my son was in possession of cannabis, which that case is still pending. And this is where the nightmare began. Um, Not long after he was arrested, this alleged second victim uh, had made no disclosure, and they had dropped those charges. So they proceeded for 5 years from, June of 2020 until February of this year is when he actually had trial. And it's ironic, like, how could you go all those years with like no progression of the case? And
Mhm.
they kept dragging it along, and we were seeking other discovery and, we were consistently blown off. I mean, he had 53 court appearances from the beginning till his trial with no issue. My son has no criminal record prior to this, never been in any kind of trouble. Um, it's insane to think that our justice system is so just not what we people believe in. If you've never had any experience in the justice system, you really can't comprehend how flawed and how biased it can be. We're talking about a family that my son was married into that is so wealthy that they have ties to the governor of Connecticut. They attend his uh, governor ball. They have dinner with him. They listen, this is not just making allegations. This stuff can be verified on the internet, and it's really scary when you think what kind of influence that holds on a judicial case. Because if people out there don't think that this is real, look around. It's
Oh,
everywhere. It's
definitely.
everywhere.
And you had also, we were talking earlier, you started a website regarding this case.
Yes.
Can you
Yes.
tell me more about that real quick?
Sure. I started a website with some help from his girlfriend, and we want to get the truth out of there. We want people to read the facts of the case. I understand this is a sensitive subject for people, and that they're going to look at it and be like, I don't know if I believe that. Let me just say that after his conviction in February, my son, at the direction of his counsel, had a polygraph test done by a vetted polygraph examiner that works for the federal government, for Homeland Security, FBI. And this is what this guy's done for 33 years. And my son took that polygraph test and he passed it. And we were hoping to utilize that in his sentencing hearing, as well as his motion for bond pending appeal. And the judge could care less. And it's really crazy because, as part of this whole thing in Connecticut, when you're let out on probation or parole, part of your condition is you must take a polygraph whenever your probation officer requests it. And if you do not take that polygraph test, it's a violation and they will send you back to jail. And this same judge that actually heard the case did indeed do that to one person. He sent a man for violation of parole back to jail because he refused to take the polygraph test. How is that not hypocrisy in thinking you're not going to take into consideration that my son passed the polygraph test and you use the same test to mitigate risk for a probationer, right? But you're
Mm.
not going to use it as mitigating risk to allow a bond pending appeal. So All
Right.
of these things that we've been compiling, I really want to get out there to the public. That's why we started the website. I will be uploading other documents as well as trial transcripts for people to read this on their own and
Right.
form their own educated decision. Because what's being put in the media right now in the state of Connecticut and other places is not accurate. They claim there was two victims. Yes, he was arrested for two, but that's not what he was charged with, not what he was tried for, not what he was convicted for. And so this false narrative that they keep portraying that he was a babysitter for some woman, that's not true. This was his ex-wife and her
Mhm.
children, not his own child, but her children. And so how do you keep presenting this? They claim that they want to use initials during the trial, which I can understand. They're minors. But
Mhm.
she went on a social media post the day after his conviction from 5 years ago and posted under it with her own name and identified herself as the mother of these children, alleging that there was two victims that he was convicted of. And now, of course, since I brought this to light during his sentencing, that's no longer there. She's removed it. But if you're so concerned about, the identity of yourself and your children, why would you do that? Why would you dig up a post from 5 years ago on social media?
Well, hopefully, Judge Peter McShane will actually even look at this website and see the truth.
Well, she's since removed it. Her comment on there is gone.
Well, I mean, even your website. He should have a
Yes,
good hard look at your website.
yes.
Because,
You know,
right, because like with these transcripts, it's like very frustrating that they're asking her questions and every answer out of her mouth is I don't know until a beauty salon is mentioned, then she remembers that.
yes. Um, During the testimony for not only the alleged victim, but as well as the mother, it was very obvious that they couldn't remember things that would have incriminated themselves or helped Nicholas's case in any way. When the prosecution was questioning them, the judge allowed leading questions in certain instances. When our next defense attorney was questioning her, she really didn't know how to respond. And one really important moment in that was there was a recording that was made by her mother where she testifies that when she first learned of this, alleged disclosure, that she went and made this recording with her daughter. So she's, stating this is the first time I've spoke to her, and she records the, exchange. They're walking to wherever they're walking, you can hear in the recording, and she says, the daughter says, "It's a nice day out," and her mother says, "It is." And then before any disclosure is made, the child says, "These are all weird words." And her mother says, "Well, then use different words and I'll know what you're talking about." And then at the end of the conversation, it's a discussion about breakfast. "Well, what do you want for breakfast? Do you want me to make you something or do you want to order food?" And the daughter says, "Well, can we get donuts, like a dozen, maybe two?" So totally the demeanor of the conversation. Um, if that was myself having this conversation with my daughter, which I do have a daughter, I would not be discussing food. Or how would you know what your daughter is talking about when this is the first conversation you're having? And if they're her own words, why would she be saying, "These are all weird words"? Why
Mhm.
are they weird if they're hers? Um, that was one of the things that was brought up during her testimony. Now, the prosecution did not enter that recording into evidence, but we were allowed, as a defense team, to play it for her while wearing headphones and question her about the statements that she made in that. And it was really obvious when she listened to it and the attorney went to ask her a question, "What did you mean?" She turned around and she was looking at the room of spectators. And he says to her, "Why are you looking over there?" And she says, "I'm confused." "Why are you confused about your own words in a recording that you made with your mother? Why are you confused about what we're asking you to elaborate what that meant?" And, it was during her testimony that we had a break for lunch. And we had informed the attorney, my son's attorney, that myself and my husband witnessed one of her mother's friends nodding her head and in a motion of coaching the child while she was being questioned by the prosecution. And not only did we see it, the bailiff on our side, the marshal, actually went up and said something to this woman. On the opposite end of the courtroom, we had a lot of friends and family there in support of Nicholas. They actually witnessed, three other people witnessed another woman, an older woman with shoulder length gray hair and a ponytail, doing something very similar. And the bailiff on that side of the room actually addressed it with that person. So when we came back from our break from lunch and we told our attorney, look, we've watched these people coaching the witness. He addressed this with the court before the jury was brought in. The judge, Judge McShane, tells the people, the spectators, like, look, it's a privilege to be here, and that you can't be, doing anything like nodding your head. And it was really ironic because he makes the comment, like, when people are testifying, sometimes you're nodding your head in like an affirmation of what they're saying. That is not at all what we witnessed. Not at all. And that was how he left it. The jury was brought in for her continued testimony. And during my son's sentencing, there was quite a few of us. We had written letters in support of Nick. He had 20 letters in support, plus his own. And people actually put in their letters to the court what they observed. They were there. They read their letters to the judge. And he was not happy that people were pointing this out and actually sat there after and said, this never happened. Well, if it never happened, it was brought to your attention during her testimony. It's in the transcripts. And he completely denied any wrongdoing in his court.
Oh, you know what? We're going to have a talk about that after this podcast, you and me.
Okay, that would be
Okay.
great.
I'll give you.
So it's really scary to think that the law says that any influence or coaching that is alleged, that a mistrial should be granted, that the jury should be aware of this alleged coaching. Let them decide. That was not allowed at all. So, how do you think of getting a fair trial? I mean, and that's just a small piece of the judicial misconduct that we observed the first day of trial when we went in. We had witness lists, they had a witness list, and on our witness list, we had some of the relatives, of course, listed. And we went in for the first day of trial, and we had no knowledge that a in chambers conversation was taking place, that the judge allowed the victim's, the alleged victim's grandfather to sit in on the trial, even though he had been sequestered, stating that he was allowing it so that he could offer support. For what? He was sequestered. And so why would we then call him as a witness when he sat through the whole trial? How does that happen?
Everybody knows somebody, and there's too much collusion. I,
Absolutely.
I literally warn people, don't marry anyone wealthy. Don't marry anyone who's connected to, we'll say, the police, fire department, judges, attorneys. Don't marry anyone connected to anybody. I guess that's my best advice. As far as getting married, I don't know.
Well, it's sad that we live in a culture that that's what we have to think about
Hmm.
because, my son is a good-hearted person. He has had a outpouring of support since we've went public. People even from high school, one being a high school teacher. Listen, it's really comforting to know that the people that know my son are standing up for him to say he would never do this. This is not the person we know, and I don't believe it.
Hmm.
And, it's hard because some people I know that have reached out privately have said things to me, but they're afraid of going public because of their career choice, because of, other people that are, coming against the people that are publicly coming out and supporting him. And it's sad that people aren't reading the facts. I've offered the facts to people. I've said to them, on private messages, listen, I'll show you. Come to my house, sit
Hmm.
down and read what I have. Look at the case documents, then form an educated decision, an opinion based off the facts, not what people are saying. not what you're seeing in the newspapers, because they're not facts. It's not the truth.
Right.
And it's scary to think that people don't want to do that. They don't want to take the time to do that. They just want to, you know, say
It's
what they want
it's
without
that
being informed.
right, it's that cancel culture. People just blindly, for lack of a better word, dumbly believe everything they hear. And they
Yes,
don't go to the other side and say, "Hey, I heard this about you. What's going on? Can you tell me more?" And I'm sure that person would gladly tell you their side of the story. There's two
sure.
sides of the coin.
Oh, absolutely. And the thing of it is we have so much other stuff that we've collected. There was a lot of evidence that we didn't present at trial. I spent an enormous time, a lot of resources on private investigating, researching her history, people she had been involved in, even family members that she had had, and even family members that the child has in the state of California. And it was really troubling when people started telling us all of this information and stories that had been shared by my son's ex-wife about her history. And then to find out that it was fabricated. Like there
Mhm.
was no evidence to support these elaborate, like really crazy stories that she had come up with about, being kidnapped and extorted in adult ways. And I come to find out that her oldest child's father, that she alleged and told other people, this is documented. She told other people that this man had murdered his pregnant girlfriend and then got stabbed to death in jail. That is totally false.
Oh,
Totally false. The kid died of an accidental drug overdose during a traffic stop. He had drugs on him. He swallowed them to try to, I guess, not get caught with them. And the balloon ruptured, and he died of an accidental drug overdose the next day. This was in North Dakota. Anybody that wants to research it, they can. I have a copy of his death certificate, the case file, everything, even the dash cam footage from when the man was pulled over.
right.
This is the truth, not what she's been telling people. Why would you make up a story like that? Is that what she told her child about her father? Like, I'm not saying what happened to him, was a great story to tell a child, but to have her daughter think that what her father did was that's awful, awful. Why would she not tell the biological family of this child about this alleged incident with my son? She spoke to them this same month that he was arrested and said nothing, nothing. And all they shared with these private investigators was how all her son wanted to do was have a relationship with his child. And all she did was make it difficult
Hmm.
over and over. She claimed that he, followed her to New York and was stalking her and all these other things. That's not true. Her old social media pages have pictures of the two of them together here in New York with her family for Easter. And, I'm only sharing this because this stuff we didn't share. I understand some of this is you're getting in the weeds and the details of her life, but if she goes to these lengths to make stories up about being a victim in her own life,
Hmm.
what would make people not think that she would do the same now?
Right. Because
And
perpetual
that's a
liars don't
pattern.
stop. Right. It's a
It's a
perpetual
pattern.
lying. Yeah. And there's too many of these personality disorders running around out there.
Yes. Yes.
Oh.
Well, that's when we got into the other aspects of the case itself. So the major, items that Nick has really on appeal. Of course, some of them were raised during his motion for new trial. In
Hmm.
his motion for new trial, the major issue is the DNA. They entered into evidence DNA that they alleged was like the nail in the coffin, and the prosecution relied on that throughout the whole case. And so basically, for people to kind of understand, Nicholas willingly gave his DNA when he was interviewed.
Hmm.
Of course, when he was questioned, they made all these allegations. They had DNA and all of these other things. And he thought, well, this will exonerate me, right?
Uh,
So he gave his DNA and they did not do a direct match. They did what they call DNA profiling. And, you can look that up and try to understand when they do a DNA profile, almost like when they do like DNA for like when you're looking for your relatives. So they do like a profile to
Mhm.
find other people that share some of that same DNA, but it's not a match. For the FBI to be consider that credible for their threshold for evidence, you
Mhm.
have to have an 8 marker match or a profile. They used 5 markers from this alleged DNA that they found during this case. And out of the 5, in some of those incidents, only one allele, one DNA match to what they claim to have matched in that house. But what's really ironic was even though they claim that they found this match through a DNA profile, no DNA was found from the alleged victim, none. The other DNA that they claimed was part of this mixture that they did find was not the alleged victim, and no semen was found. No other bodily fluids from any kind of encounter that they claim have happened was found. No blood, no urine, no fecal matter, nothing was found. So even if they had a direct match, what does that prove? He lived in the house.
Mhm.
The last day my son spent in that house, he had gotten a message from his, wife that he was separated from, that she asked him to clean the house because she was bringing home her new a girlfriend and wanted the house cleaned. Well, would that involve making beds? Would that involve doing laundry or whatever else she was asking him to do to pick up the house? So even if my son's DNA was a direct match and it was found, what does that prove? He was in the house that he lived in. And to not find any of the other biological evidence that they claim would have proved the alleged incident was not found. None of it.
Mhm.
So the attorneys filed a motion in limine to exclude the DNA evidence because the law clearly states that if it doesn't meet the threshold to be considered evidence, that it's not to be included. If the methodology that was utilized for that forensic examination, if it's questionable, to not be included. There was none of the victim's DNA found. So why would they include this just to confuse the jury? And the prosecution relied on that heavily. The statements they made were incorrect. That is part of our prosecutorial misconduct, objection, and statements that they made throughout the case. So that's an additional ground that he's utilizing for his motion for, that he used in his motion for new trial, but also will be raising that on appeal. The
Mhm.
third really important issue was the judge would not allow them to enter the divorce records into evidence. The divorce records are clearly the motive here. Proves your motive. She clearly states she wants sole physical custody of the child. And in addition, the other divorce agreement, when they finally settled, it states in there that if Nicholas loses his liberty, he loses his parenting privileges.
Mhm.
The judge felt that wasn't relevant, would not allow it to be entered into evidence. Of course, they did have testimony on that, which she denied a lot of it. And what was really the icing on the cake was as soon as the trial was over, jury deliberations started.
Mhm.
Within 2.5 hours into deliberations, the jury sends a note. We all reconvene. And what does the note say? They want the divorce records. Now, the judge said to everybody when we went in, it's not on the record, but his words to us were, folks, I made a mistake. Calls the jury in, lets them know, look, I can't provide these. They weren't entered into evidence. So you have to go off what we have. And it really, you fast forward to the sentencing where they argued on his motion against bond pending appeal and the motion for new trial. Well, there was clearly testimony on this. So why was it relevant for the records? Well, you can sit and say that all you want, but the jury felt it was important.
Mhm.
They didn't get the answers in the testimony that was provided. So I don't care what the prosecution had to say or the judge really had to say on whether or not there was enough testimony because the jury was the decider. And clearly they didn't have the information that they were seeking. And so that exclusion affected my son's ability to properly defend his case, the allegations against him, and what the motive was. that's in everything that you say, every kind of case. What's the motive? People want to know what's the motive. And without motive, it's very difficult to argue your case. That's a violation of his constitutional right.
Right.
Those three things are
Mhm.
really the main things that we are bringing up on appeal. There are other evidentiary things, one being the DCF records. There was about 152 pages of DCF records, which are Department of Families and Children in Connecticut's, equivalent to like a child protective service for the state of Connecticut.
Mhm.
And those records were not allowed into evidence. Those records, I know are sealed normally. They're in the state of Connecticut. But given the fact that you've got all these records and probably about 10 pages of those records have to do with this allegation itself, the records had to do with other family.
Mhm.
The judge would not even allow them to use the term DCF when questioning any of the witnesses. It's in the transcripts where he says, listen, if you have a statement in there that you want to ask the witness about, you must address it with the statement and say that, did you make this statement to an outside agency? You can't use the term DCF because he felt it would bias the witness. And I thought, isn't that the point? These are her statements
Right.
made
That
to
she
this
doesn't know.
agency.
And she doesn't know
Like,
anything.
well, they're her statements, right? And she
Right.
doesn't know where the statement's coming from. And you're not allowed to say the term DCF because you're afraid that the jury might bias the witness because she's got DCF and allegations, or whether they're substantiated, not substantiated. These are statements that were made, they're recorded, they're in the doc, and they would not allow those records in. The other records where there were about 150 pages of mental health records that we wanted entered into evidence because this goes to the credibility of the witness, and he would not allow those in. The judge himself reviewed it, and he allowed 3 pages in
So he
that he felt
suppressed
were
a,
relevant.
yeah, he suppressed a lot of evidence from this jury.
Oh, absolutely. And the thing that I really couldn't understand was, you're not a psychologist. How do
Mm.
you know what affects your ability to recall facts, your ability to be truthful, or your credibility as a whole from a psychological perspective? After the fact, I was later, informed that the reality of that is they should have had a separate hearing outside the jury, and we could have called expert witnesses in. She would have been put on the stand outside the presence of the jury to answer questions. None of that took place. He just withheld it. We had been aware in the very beginning, during jury selection, there was some motions filed that were decided on, and she actually denied being in a certain facility here in New York. We were aware that she was in that facility because during our private investigating, like I said, we questioned a lot of people that had been in relationships with her and knew the alleged victim, and he actually told us that they had separated ways, and supposedly she'd been put in a facility and would not be released to anybody but him. We actually had that on recording. I could not authenticate the recording at the time, but I played the recording for my son's attorney, who, of course, they all went into chambers to discuss this, but the witness denied ever being there. And they did not subpoena the records, and they never pushed it any further. So those records weren't even included in this 150 pages. How does this happen? How do you withhold evidence that they have no idea how it may have affected the trial, how the jury would view it? How, why would we not call in another expert to evaluate this and tell us what's relevant and what's not? This same judge, after at the conclusion of the trial and deliberations had started, I was in the hallway with other people that witnessed him, the alleged victim's grandfather, and another judge who we knew he was friends with because we had seen him with him many times, get in the elevator together. I watched it. These other people that were with me observed this same situation. We were all shocked. And then when that elevator closed, a couple minutes later, it came back, and the other judge, who the grandfather was friends with, got out, but not the grandfather. and not Judge McShane.
Can you name that judge or you don't want to?
I believe his name was Edward Rodriguez Jr. And we had observed the grandfather friendly with him before at family court cases. There was a family court case in 23 with Nicholas and his child and his ex-wife, where we were all in the hallway waiting, and this judge came over. He was plain clothes, and the grandfather got up and shook his hand, and he said, "Good morning, Your Honor." And he said, "Hi." I addressed him by his first name, and they went back into chambers.
And this is Judge Edward Rodriguez Jr.
Correct. And so that same judge, when this incident happened with the elevator, we were standing in front of the door to the court. Judge McShane walked out. Just as Judge McShane walked out of the court, here came the other judge, Edward, Rodriguez Jr., and the two of them walked towards the elevators. And out from the corner where there's like little side rooms and the bathrooms came the alleged victim's grandfather, and they all got in the elevator together. I watched them. And so, how does that happen? Is that not a clear I, exposure of some kind of conflict?
Collusion,
Yeah.
complete. What everyone needs to know is this happens in every courthouse, every day, every
Yes.
hour. And your son's case is not a one-off. My case was not a one-off. This is happening to so many. There's, I bet your son is going to run into over 60 guys where he's incarcerated at who are under false allegations at
Yes.
taxpayers' expense
Yes.
because the judiciary withheld evidence from the jury, also suppressed evidence. It's or also, we also have to bear in mind these clerks are sneaky. Sometimes they
hmm
won't give the judge evidence.
Well, it's not only that. I have
Yeah,
since requested a copy of his case file, and originally they told me there was 824 pages, and then when I went to pick it up, there was only 311. So I have to reach out to them again. I mean, like, why am I
interesting.
not getting everything?
Hmm.
Why? Because this courthouse where it sits in Bridgeport, Connecticut, uh, their family donates millions of dollars to the state of Connecticut, to this very city where my son's trial was. We are not talking about somebody that just knows somebody, it's their neighbor. We're talking about a family that donates a lot of money, that are very politically involved in the local hospitals, in fundraising, in other real estate endeavors down there. And it's ironic that literally, if you walk out the front of the court, there's a digital sign on a building with their last name across it, going across as you walk out. Now, the jury sees that in
Right.
and out. They know the name. The names weren't given publicly during the trial, but they were able to visually see what the names of the alleged, victim and the family members are.
And it
How,
subliminally gets in their heads.
well, not only that, okay, they're not supposed to look stuff up. Let's be real.
Yeah.
If they see that name and they know it in any way by reading it in their papers, and now they're on this trial, maybe they work somewhere where they're worried about the influence and how it's going to affect their jobs or their careers or their children's where they go to school with. Who knows? I mean, even the people that were interviewed during the private investigating, there was almost all of them said, I would never testify. I won't give, I can't get involved. There was one mother of a man that dated her, said she was the worst thing that ever happened to her son. That's what she said. She goes, tell Nicholas's mother I'll be praying for them.
Oh,
That's what she said. So I understand people are scared and they're fearful, but I hope that you're never in my shoes, because you're going to hope and pray that somebody has the audacity and the guts to stand up to this, because this is why it happens. People are too scared. They don't want to get involved. And it's not fair to the people like my son that are paying the consequences because people are too fearful to stand up for what they believe in or
and
what
that,
they know, what they can share.
right. That's also, I don't know, that leaves a bad taste in my mouth because these people should come forward and tell the truth.
Right.
Eventually, no matter how powerful and wealthy they are, they if 20 people come forward that may be afraid of these people, but if they come forward, that kind of outnumbers these wealthy people, but still, okay, maybe they can do something to their jobs or
Yes.
their kids. But I definitely would not let an innocent man go to jail. That's just how I stand. It just wouldn't be happening. I would come forward if my job depended on it. I couldn't let
Well,
that go. Mm.
well, I think that too many people, you see what's going on in the news. I absolutely think that in my son's case, that our judicial system has been weaponized,
Right.
not only in criminal, but in family court. False allegations against his own child in 23 when he has supervised visitation from an agency that's state approved, making claims that he took the child out of state. My son never went to a supervised visit with his child without one of his family members with him. I was adamant I wouldn't even let him drive in the state of Connecticut because I was
Mhm.
so concerned about them pulling us over. Um, 5 years on bond, no issue. 53 court appearances, no issue. He took a polygraph test and passed it. He took an evaluation that is specific for this type of case. It's done by a professional, and it was done by a forensic agency in New York City. A lot of times they use these evaluations for people that are trying to get out on probation or parole, and I asked for it, listen, is this an idea that we can do? And the attorneys thought it was a phenomenal idea. So they retained this company and he went and had it done. And they said he is attracted to adult females. That's what it said. Even his pre-sentencing investigation report done by the probation department in Connecticut listed him as a low risk for, recidivism. I mean, how many things can he do that people don't say, listen, maybe there's something here. Maybe he didn't do it. Maybe I should read this information and decide, hey, maybe some injustice is here. What can I do to help? I am looking for people, either people that know information, know the situation in the family, that can come and, and share with us some information that would help my son in his case. I'm looking for people, experts out there that might be able to assist in his appellate brief, his bond pending appeal, that was denied, that we're still going to continue to fight for. Anybody that can come and help, or just share his story, read the information and say something's not right here. That's what we're looking for. This is not fair to my son to be incarcerated for something he didn't do.
No.
It's not. Our family has been living this nightmare for 5 years. I have four children. Nicholas is my second oldest. And then I have one daughter. She's my youngest. So I have three boys and my daughter. I have two granddaughters.
Mm.
You know, I have three granddaughters. Actually, my daughter has an 8-month old. And one grandson, And for the people out there who have young boys, teenagers, young men, please talk to them, explain to them this can happen. I've had so many people reach out telling me horror stories of their teenage boys that false allegations come up, and all you can do is try to defend them. This is not isolated in any way. There's case studies out there that show people who are going through a custody battle or a divorce. This is very common, very common. I mean, my son's other attorney here in New York State, he does a lot of family law, but he also does criminal. And he said, Darla, this is common.
Hmm.
It's shocking to think that there's no recourse for us. What's our recourse? I mean, aside from her coming out and saying, I lied about all of this, how do you go after a family like theirs and try to get some recourse? Like, why is there's nothing in play for families that do discover information or evidence that they completely lied and fabricated this to have some recourse against the person that makes these allegations, or the fact that the police department did not do a thorough investigation. They had those records where she said one thing, oh, this happened when we went to the friend's house to swim, to 2 weeks later, it happened overnight. Why did they not question that? I mean, I don't
Mhm.
know if you just say, were they just ignorant, didn't care, uh, paid off? I don't know. But it's their obligation as officers to do their due diligence and examine the evidence that they've gathered. That didn't happen. That didn't
Right.
happen. The officer that they first interviewed, who claims to have taken the first statement, on her testimony says that at the conclusion of her statement, that she contacted DCF to make the report because she's a mandated reporter. Correct? That's what officers are. That's a lie. She claimed on testimony that she made the call to DCF at 1:56 in the afternoon. Well, in the beginning of her testimony, she says that her shift started at 3. And the DCF records don't reflect any call from that officer whatsoever regarding these allegations. That call was actually made from the family's attorney when they made the report to DCF. So, how do you have officers testifying to things that are not correct? The record's not correct. Even the officer that was the lead detective, the judge was not happy with him because he just couldn't get his story straight.
Oh,
Then you've got an interview of my son, an audio video of their interrogation. The audio was so bad, you couldn't hear it, you couldn't understand it. They even had a jury member that offered to help because he used to work in some newscast, and he offered to even help to try to get it so you could hear it and understand it. So then they created a aid for the jury that was a transcript that wasn't supposed to be entered into evidence, but it was supposed to be an aid for them. That was even the transcript. Every page, every other page said inaudible, inaudible,
hmm.
inaudible. So you're giving an aid to them. They can't understand the video, right? Now you're giving an aid that's not complete. How are they supposed to rely on an aid that's not complete? And by the way, my son never confessed to anything. He denied, denied, denied the entire thing. He gave scenarios of which, you know, that he thought may explain some of the things that they were alleging because police use, interrogation tactics that we know and I don't know anybody that really understands this. They're allowed to lie. I mean, they're allowed to be deceitful.
Oh,
And it
yes.
was really ironic that their claim when they testified was they used deceitful tactics to try to promote a truthful response.
Hmm.
What? Well, is that what you got? You lied to him about having all this evidence that was not there, that was fabricated. And did you get a truthful response? Because all my son did was continually say, I never did this. I wouldn't do this during the entire interrogation. But it's crazy to think that they allowed this recording to go in. You can't hear it, an aid that's not complete, but they give it to the jury with bits and pieces. It's it's absurd in thinking about how many people are the same victim here that go through this.
Hmm.
Nobody, laws need to change on both aspects for the
Right.
people that are facing this. If my son had no resources and did not have a family that was supportive, he would have been in jail a long time ago. He would have been with a
Why?
public defender
Right.
that has 100 cases and does not have the time and the resources to properly defend somebody. I
And
mean,
they
really,
and they waited
they
5 years
don't.
for this.
Yeah,
Well,
I
go ahead.
I'm just frustrated because you feel like helpless. That's how you feel. You feel helpless. And I'm not a person to give up. Anybody that knows me would tell you I have a very strong constitution, and I also believe in you just don't give up. You just keep going. And eventually God will open a door for you that will make things change.
Well,
And my son said it best during his sentencing.
mhm.
Your Honor, you cannot tell the truth if you're misinformed. And he said, everybody here has been misinformed. That's what he said.
Mhm.
And, we're hoping by getting his story out that people can be informed about the facts of the case and stand up with Nicholas for his return home and the justice for him and turning over his wrongful conviction.
I agree. The scary part is when people go on supervised visitation, I think they should be wearing body cams because you can't trust what's going to go on, even if they took, a parent with them, like you said.
Hmm.
But you've got to have, some type of evidence to prove that nothing happened anyway. You don't know what the supervisor,
Yes.
who is well connected, can come up with.
Well, that's really was what we discussed, that if the visits, had been reinstated, that we would do that. And the visits were reinstated with a new supervisor. And we, in the very beginning, that supervisor, was very strict because, they don't know you. And you understand, like I said, these are serious allegations. And I completely understand the seriousness of those allegations. And like I said, we would not go without other people there, but we had entertained getting a body cam footage either to put on the child, right? Or on my son, because at that point we were worried that they were going to try to make allegations of who knows what. And I mean, I can assure you, I would never even put my son in a position for anybody to say he was in an environment or have that opportunity because of the seriousness of this. I was shocked when they came out with it. And it was you're looking at the case and thinking, well, why didn't you enter that into evidence?
Hmm.
The case was closed. That's why. They couldn't bring it up because the case was closed. And they can't bring up allegations that were substantiated in the court. But they brought it up at the sentencing,
When did Nicholas see his child last in supervised visits?
February.
Hmm.
During the trial was our one of our last visits. And then, she had every excuse to not continue them.
Yeah.
And to be honest, even after the trial and he was convicted, she's still in violation because he was still entitled to his supervised visits. And we really had to pick our battle at that point. We had a lot going on. He had a lot of things going on, things that we were following up with. And I just didn't have the time and the resources to continue that fight, honestly. I feel
Yeah.
terrible because, I miss my granddaughter immensely. Nicholas's other child, the last time he saw her was the day of his verdict. His other child's mother, of course, I understand her perspective of the courts need to approve continued, considering he was now convicted. So we did file paperwork in court for that. And unfortunately, she's sided with his ex-wife, even though she has not a full picture. I had offered her to read the transcript. She did not. And so he was ordered, granted FaceTime visits with his other child. And his last FaceTime visit with her was the night before he went, for sentencing.
This is a nightmare. I remember back when, I don't know, I think I was 15 or 16, but there was a high school teacher that was suddenly convicted of improperly touching two girls in his class. He was a math teacher. Okay, and they showed him coming down the courthouse hallway, and his wife was with him, and they looked grim. And, they had cameras and attorneys around them and whatever. My mother said, "He did it. I know where there's smoke, there's fire. He did it." I said, "Mom, I'm not picking that up off of him. I don't
Right,
know that what it was, but I was not getting that weird feeling. I don't know where she
right.
was getting this from." And I said, "He didn't do it." So,
Hmm.
months go by. He went through his 401k, you know how they drain you, right?
Oh, yes.
And suddenly, I think it was like maybe 4 or 5 months later, these girls came forward that they were ticked off because he gave them a D on their math test. So they concocted a story and put
Yes.
him through that. But did
Hmm.
anything come as far as, because I was wondering, even as a 15 or 16-year-old kid, I was wondering, well, did they face any, retribution for lying on someone like this? No, no.
No.
these are laws that have got to come out. I think Robert Garza is working on false allegations, things like that. I know Ulysses Butch Slaughter is working on false accusations as
Mhm.
well. Uh, because they also, you can make a law, but you've got to have these people follow the law.
Sure.
How do you get these people to follow the law when there's no oversight?
Well, I think that's really the issue here is, there's laws in place that are supposed to protect people like that,
Right,
for us. And you're right. I mean, I asked Child Protective Services, how do people make false allegations and get away with it?
right.
And I was told by an agent, it's very difficult to prove. That's what I was told. Yeah, they're supposed to have recourse for that, but um, it's really difficult to prove. And I had even said in my sentencing letter when we had Nick's sentence, there was a text message that my husband had received from Nick's ex-wife, then separated. And she said to her, and it was just during their separation before all of these allegations came out. He said, how are you holding up? Because we had an amicable, relationship with her. And she said that the child wasn't doing well. And she said it was the saddest thing she'd ever seen because the child made a comment and said, I finally have a dad that looks like me. And now I don't have a dad because her oldest child had red hair like my husband or like, my son. And her other child is of Spanish descent. So she looked like her father. And so would that be a motive? She felt she was angry over not now having a dad. The mother had alleged that my son was having an affair, and the child said these things. This is documented that the child alleged that the reason that the parents had split was because he was, cheating. So if she knew these things or thought that he might take her sister, who she was very fond of and treated her, like a baby doll, carried around all the time and, things like that. And so what's the motive? Like you're saying, here you've got two 15-year-old girls that allege something over getting a bad grade. And here you're talking about a child that is upset because she felt like she lost her father and is upset because her mom is, distraught because, she's alleging he did these things or that she might take her younger sister. I mean, is it really that far-fetched to think that a child would make these allegations? I don't think so. I don't think so.
Mhm.
Whether or not the rest of the family know these things, I don't know. I think that they all believe her story, but I absolutely think that the mother knows the truth. Given the conversation that I heard, I absolutely think that the mother knows the truth and she's just running with this. Whether or
Eh,
not the child fabricated it from the beginning, I don't know. Like we can all sit and speculate. I feel
Right.
bad for all of them. Listen, I'm a person of faith, and I believe that we're not in control, that there's a way being made for my son. And I also, it sounds crazy. I pray for that family. My granddaughter is there. That family is with my granddaughter. I pray for them. And I hope that someday they'll realize and know the truth that, my son did not do this. He would never do this. And he only wanted to be a dad.
Hmm.
That's what he wanted. He wanted to be in his child's life and he just wanted to be a dad.
I've had other parents tell me that in family court, they take away your kids. You got to fight for supervised visits. You have to fight for, like they gave me non-custodial. I could only see my kids every other weekend and no contact orders, and that included holidays and Mother's Day. But if you're a criminal and you are in jail, they're allowed to see their kids all the time. So you know what? This
I
ex
know.
of his could be in for a rude awakening.
Yeah, it's shocking. It's disturbing, but more than anything, people just really don't realize how it's happening every day in our court
Right.
systems and in every kind of case. Every kind of case. I know from experience that you really only get your fair shake when you start to go to the appellate court, and because it's a lot more difficult for them to navigate that with more than one judge.
Hmm.
And it's still concerning for us because it's the state of Connecticut, and I know their connections,
Hmm.
but like I said, I still have faith that this will work out, that Nicholas's name will be cleared and he'll be home with us. And that's what we're fighting for. You know, uh, Anybody that wants to reach out, we've created the website, Nicholas Hall, mystory.org. We've shared it on social media. We also have Justice for Nick on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. You can, find the website through there. On the website, it has our contact email, uh, as well as a phone number. And anybody that wants to even anonymously give information for his case itself, if they have any information about, the family, uh, anything, I would really love for somebody to stand up and have a voice in this.
Right, people, I would like people to not be so afraid of losing their careers. They may not. They can
Right,
come forward, speak out, and they may not have any fears.
right.
The more people that speak out, the problem will be solved.
Yes, I think that enough people come forward and start sharing information about any other case that they know of that this family's been involved in and has been swayed because of their influence. Any of that information would be helpful. And like I said, if they want to remain anonymous, I do understand that. But, there might be another way that we can get that information out without identifying who they are. And,
Right,
my son deserves this. He
right,
deserves a fair shot at a trial.
right.
And he was not given that.
No, we don't bring kids into this world thinking that, this is going to happen.
Right,
I mean, I went into the court system thinking, well, everything's going to be fair, right? A lot of parents do. We're all tricked into thinking this.
right.
And then you get in there, there's no due process. They're not looking at evidence. When I was in federal court, I submitted 1,000 pieces of evidence, and there was a telephonic phone conference. And Judge Lanzillo stated on this telephonic phone conference that he never looked at the exhibits. So I had to file another
Yes.
motion stating, read the exhibits. And
Yeah.
then two days later, he wanted to dismiss the case. So I took it to the appellate court. It rotted there for 4 months and they dismissed it. So collusion wins, I'm sorry to say, and that has got to stop.
Right. I mean, like I said, look in the papers, look at the news. People are talking about this all over. This is not isolated. It happens in every judicial arena out there, civil, criminal, family. You know, uh, it's sad that so many people believe in a system that's so broken. I mean, and that's
Right.
really what it is. They
Right.
so believe in this and they think that our constitutional rights are like written in stone and that
No.
everybody follows them, and they don't.
No, I
And there
know.
has to be accountability for these
Right.
elected officials, appointed officials that don't do their job. I think that that's probably where we need to start. Let's start making the people that aren't following the Constitution and their obligation and their oath when they come into these types of careers that aren't doing the right thing.
Well, I know of a judge who yelled at an attorney and said, I don't have to follow the Constitution. That actually made the newspaper.
Wow.
Yeah, and this is how emboldened they have gotten. And that was years ago. That had to
Right.
be over like 12, 15 years. She was also blowing off hearings to get her hair and nails done, so they zapped her on that
Wow.
too. Things like there's stuff going on that the taxpayer needs to know about. Your son is
Oh, yeah.
suffering in there for lies, uh, and this can happen to anyone.
Well, I started writing Nick letters literally the day after he went in. I've written him a letter every day. I send him a letter, I send him some scripture, I send him, like crosswords, word searches, something. Do you know he's not gotten one letter from anybody? Now, I understand that it takes time for them to get them, process them. I understand that. I'm not being, unrealistic and knowing, look, it's a process. And now he got transferred, to a prison from where he was in jail in Bridgeport. And but he's nothing. He was even sent a book by his girlfriend. He's got nothing. I mean, for a while he was brushing his teeth with the top of a milk carton and a spoon. Where's our money going for a toothbrush?
When I was in jail, I had a small toothbrush. It was, I don't know, can you see that
Yeah,
long? And I had a plastic cup, like they give you in the hospital,
yeah.
and that's all I had. I don't think they gave me toothpaste. Trying to think, I think that's all they gave me. And
Hmm.
then you're sleeping on a horse blanket,
Yeah,
and you run hot and cold. They run these jails hot and cold to irritate. And then at nighttime, they had the lights on all the time, and the guards were talking real loud at night, and I mean, it's like you're only standing 2 feet away from each other, really. So I was watching
right.
them, and I thought to myself, wow, now I know why there are prison uprisings. I'm sorry. That's like you're keeping people, no sleep. They're barely
Hmm.
eating. The food they're eating, honest to God, they gave me oatmeal with 2 hot dogs on it. I can't make it up.
Wow.
It stunk so bad. It was like,
Oh.
I there were 2 girls that were meth addicts. They said, "Oh, can we have your food?" I said, "Yeah, go ahead, take it," because they were coming off. Yeah, it was just it's these prisons are the human rights violations that go on in these prisons because these parents or these inmates are not getting their subscribed prescribed medications either.
Right. Well, that's the thing. You want these people to obey their rules, right? You want them to kind of all get along to some degree because you don't want to have issues among the inmates. But it's like you said, you're creating an environment where
Mhm.
you're just going to cause chaos if they're not getting the sleep, not getting their medications, things of that nature. And look, we all understand. You go to prison, there's, you're not there for a vacation. And so like you
Mhm.
understand that, but you still have a constitutional right to be treated like a human.
Right, correct. Because
And
yeah,
it's just doesn't seem like that's what happens. And nonetheless, now you've got somebody that comes out from prison who's angry
right.
at the way they were treated. They weren't treated like somebody that did something wrong. You're paying the consequences, and we're trying to help you come out and be a productive citizen. They're angry because how they were treated in the prisons. How does that help them to come out and be productive, citizens? It's upsetting because it's a money-making scheme. The government makes a lot of money off prisons and incarcerating people. And what's really sad is a large percentage of these poor people that are in there are just that. They're very economically poor. They
Hmm.
didn't couldn't afford representation. They end up with a public defender that can't properly oversee their case and defend them. They literally, I had one attorney tell me, he's like, it's like going into trauma in the ER. You're going in trying to just save whoever is bleeding the most. They
Right.
don't have time to read cases and do the detail work. They just cut a deal, take a plea deal,
No, never take a
and
plea. Never, never, never. I'm not a
and
lawyer. I
it's
can't give
sad.
advice. Right. Yeah, I can't give advice. There's no such thing as good legal advice. But the
Yeah.
system, people say the system's broken. Oh no, they have it working exactly the way they want so they can churn out, broken parents, broken
Mhm.
children. So the
Right.
system is like a well-oiled, fine piece of well-tuned machinery that's been going on like this for yeah, maybe hundreds of years. Okay. And they don't care because it's a moneymaker. And did you know there are prison trade shows?
Really?
Yeah. I saw something. I'm trying to think of what show it was. I don't know if it was I don't want to misspeak, but it was on something on Netflix, but it was on like a reality type of TV thing. But they showed that this person, he attends, these trade shows to sell the toilets that flush really
Oh,
quick,
wow.
which I
Hmm.
was very impressed with the toilet in my cell because it flushed so fast. It's like, why can't mine do that at home?
Right.
And they have it do that so it's not spreading bacteria everywhere when you go to
Right.
flush a toilet. but they also had, they're showing restraints and they're smiling and they're showing new handcuffs. And this is, I mean, these are big trade shows.
Bizarre.
Yes.
That's bizarre.
So I just try to tell people, you know, speak out. I'm glad you're speaking out. I'm glad I met you. I've talked to Nick on the phone several times. He was, giving me some advice on my podcast, and I really appreciate that. And I hope you can come back for an update,
I
at
would
some
love
point.
that, Marianne. Thank you. Nick was a big advocate as well for family court and stuff. He's actually been to rallies and helped document them. He's very involved in, you know, uh, media and digital creating and things of that nature. So he's attended some rallies locally to help promote awareness about the broken family court system and other things. He is such a loving, kind person that
Mm-hmm.
even at his sentencing, we were on break and we went outside to talk to the attorney. And there was a woman sitting on the park bench outside court crying. And do you know, my son went over to ask her if she's okay. Ma'am, do you need anything? Are you okay? And here we're sitting at lunch with his family. That might be our last lunch for who knows how long. And he's worried about going up and asking this woman, are you okay? Do you
Yeah,
need help?
he really is a kind, gentle soul.
He
And
is.
for this individual to make false allegations is despicable. And
It is.
the sad part is when this child is an adult and wakes up and realizes what was done to her father, it's not going to be pretty.
No, I agree. I mean, that's why, I mentioned it during my sentencing letter because she needs to know, like if she's lying for her mother, if her mother was the one that put her up to this,
Hmm.
she needs to know what her mother's capable of. And it's a sad truth, that I absolutely believe that, her mother has a lot of mental health issues. And I don't know how far that runs in the family. I don't know what's genetic. I wasn't privy to the records that were there. I can only go off what I witnessed and the behaviors I witnessed, as well as some of the statements made during our, private investigations with the people that she had been in relationships with and the statements she made. But I can assure you this, healthy people, mentally healthy people, don't make the claims that
Right.
she did, period. And like I said, I pray for all of them. I hope that one day that they'll realize what really happened here and that the truth will prevail and that my son will come home and hopefully be able to have a relationship with his children that he so wants and desires and is entitled to. These are his children.
Hmm.
And that's what we're all fighting for, his freedom and for his children.
Well, thank you for speaking out. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, just that if anybody can offer assistance, whether it be expert advice or an attorney that might be willing to help. I know I've reached out to many organizations as well as some high profile attorneys who handle, wrongful convictions to help get this overturned, to help get my son out while this appeal is being filed, or just to get eyes on the case that they think they might be able to help with. We are not wealthy people. My husband owns a small business and I don't work. I'm disabled,
Hmm.
and I'm looking for anybody that would be willing to come and step up and give my son a voice and a platform.
Definitely. We will get the word out there. Uh, don't jump off, okay?
Okay,
Slam
I
the
appreciate
gavel.
it.
Oh, anytime. Slam the Gavel is a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these courtrooms. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie. You can find me on Spotify, YouTube. Please like and subscribe, Apple iTunes, iHeartRadio, Google, Spreaker, and other platforms I don't know about. Again, feel free to buy me a coffee to help keep this podcast going. Thank you, Darla Hall. And, I will keep everybody in my prayers as well. And thank you for speaking out.
Thank you.